Hello and welcome everybody to a new episode of the What's New in Prisma live stream. Hey Ryan, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you? That was a great intro by the one and only Koldar. You made that, right?
Exactly. It was our design team and specifically Koldar, indeed, who created this nice little intro clip for us. And we're really upping our game here in terms of professionalism. So that's really nice. And speaking of our design team, by the way, if anybody who is watching right now is a good designer or knows a good designer, at Prisma, we are actually looking for more people to join our design team. And I'm going to post an ad to a job posting that we have online at the moment into the comments so that if you or anyone you know wants to join our design team, you can do it via this job ad.
Yeah, and maybe you're linking to that job specifically. We can also probably link to the jobs section of the website, hey, because there's some other stuff up there that might be interesting as well for folks.
Yeah, of course. We're always looking for more people to join our team. And on that note, it might be interesting to talk about how we're operating as a company. And we've talked about it already in a couple of the recent streams that with COVID really happening and the workplace being shaken up a little bit, we have become a remote-first company. And that means that you can basically work from wherever you want, but that we also have an office, a really nice one actually, right in the heart of Berlin, where you can go to, where we have catered lunches, where you can chat with your colleagues, and we have really nice rooms where you can work with really nice equipment, but you're not forced to do that. You can work effectively from wherever you want.
That's awesome. Yeah, it really sucks that I can't come out to the office and see it and meet everyone. I've thought about this a couple times recently because I'm into my 4th month, I believe now at Prisma, and of course haven't met anyone in person yet. I don't think there's anybody at the company that I've interacted with in person, as far as I know. In any case, I regret not being able to come out there and see everyone and see the office. But one day soon, hopefully, once things return to normal, if that's even a thing that's going to happen in our lifetimes, we'll see. But in any case, yeah, the remote first aspect is definitely appreciated by me since I'm not there. And I think it's, of course, it opens up the possibilities for folks all over the world to work at Prisma. So check it out. Check out the job section if you're interested in something.
Exactly. And I'm actually also myself taking advantage of this remote first aspect of our company at the moment, because I'm not actually streaming from Berlin. Maybe you've noticed that the surroundings from like where I'm streaming from are different than usual.
So where are you?
I'm right now in Portugal, in Carvoeiro. So I've been here for the entire month of October, actually. And for the first 2 weeks, I've been on vacation. I actually deleted Slack from my phone for the first time in 3.5 years, which felt really good. Yep. And now back in full force, but staying here with 2 friends in an Airbnb. We're all working remotely. So we kind of turned it into a sort of co-working space. And that's where I'm staying like for another 2 days, actually. And then I'm going to return to Germany.
Okay, excellent. Is it still nice there? Like, do you get some good weather at this point in the year?
Yeah, so like right now it's very sunny. It's typically around 20 to 25 degrees, nice. But in the sun it actually feels a lot warmer. So if you spend kind of lunchtime in the sun, it rather feels like 30 degrees. So very hot, very nice weather, definitely worth the visit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I am jealous. Well, maybe one day I will do the same. In any case, you enjoy the rest of your time in Portugal. Why don't we move into what we're going to talk about today, which is 2.10. What do we have in 2.10?
So let's do our usual, and let me go ahead and share my screen to walk through the new features that we have introduced in the latest release on Tuesday. I'm going to share my full screen here, so you'll see a little bit of a mirror effect on StreamYard here at first. Not even. So, well, I guess you can see my screen now, right?
We got it.
Perfect. So here are the release notes of the latest release that came out on Tuesday. And the first thing that I want to show everybody is something that's really exciting. We broadened the range of supported databases for Prisma. And I'm very proud to say that Prisma is now enterprise ready. We're now supporting Microsoft SQL Server. So all the enterprise folks that are using Microsoft technologies at their work, specifically Microsoft SQL Server databases, they can now just go and connect Prisma to these databases and start querying them with Prisma Client. And here in the release notes, we have the most important information, as usual for you, for how to get started with it. And if you haven't seen it, we also wrote a blog post about the release and specifically about the support of SQL Server. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested in that. And what I want to show you today is a little demo that we prepared with Microsoft SQL Server. And because I'm on a Mac and I'm not able to run SQL Server natively, I'll be running everything with Docker. So here in the release notes, it says that we have prepared a ready-to-run example for MS SQL Server right here. So I'm just going to follow the link, and it sends me to our famous Prisma examples repository into the databases SQL Server folder. So this is basically the setup for everything. And what I'll do now, because these READMEs, they are like little tutorials that step-by-step explain how to run an example. What I'll do now is I'll literally just copy and paste the instructions from the README in order to get this example running. So I'm going to navigate to my desktop right here. I already have this. This can be dangerous, actually, if you accidentally delete some photo. I was scared for a second there what it would do if I don't provide any arguments, but I guess I'm good here.
Imagine doing RF on your whole computer.
Yeah, exactly. For a second, I thought it maybe might delete my home folder now, and the entire stream would just break, basically. But it looks good, so I'll just keep on following the instructions right here. And then also, I can already go into VS Code and open up the example there to show everybody what we have. So the first and most important thing for me to get started with this is to start my SQL Server instance. And I'll do that using this Docker image right here that's configured in my Docker Compose file. So I'll run the Docker Compose up command that I copied from the README file. So now if I run Docker PS, I see that I have this instance of SQL Server running. The next thing that I have to do is I have to create a database and a database schema on the SQL Server. And the way how that's done for this example is that we have this schema.sql file where we are creating a database that's called Prisma Demo. And then we just go ahead and create our typical user post tables. In fact, we're going to create a comment and a tag table as well so that we show off all the different types of relations that Prisma can handle, which are one-to-one relations, one-to-many, and many-to-many relations. So I'm running this. OK, I guess I have to choose a different database. Actually, let me. What did I do different this time that I. Let me just quickly see if I can delete the existing table plus database here in.
It's not running because the database already exists?
Yeah, exactly. But I think I could just go ahead here and delete it from table plus. And now let me try to run this again. All right, I guess if I go back to table plus now and I check the databases, we do have the Prisma demo with all the fresh tables that have been created, the ones that I just mentioned. And one thing that's interesting actually about this is the way how we are creating many-to-many relations in the Prisma schema. If we have to go database first, we create this relation table that has to adhere to a couple of conventions for the many-to-many relation to be represented properly inside the Prisma schema after introspection. So we'll see in a little bit how this actually affects the Prisma schema after introspection. So let me go back to the README and just keep following the instructions basically one by one here. So I'm going to create my .env file so that I can configure my database URL. It's in here. And because I'm on a Mac, I also have to append this part to the database URL. Otherwise, I'm going to get a timeout error when I try to introspect.
What does that mean, danger plain text?
I actually don't really know. This is some specific thing that you have to do on macOS when you connect to the SQL Server database, but I can't tell you in detail what it's for. I think we also have it in the documentation, and it has like something to do with this TLS limitation on macOS. And to work around that, when you're on a Mac, you have to add this to the connection string. All right, so we have the connection string. That means my Prisma project is connected to the database, and I can now go ahead and populate this Prisma schema, this empty Prisma schema file here, using the Prisma introspect command. And that's what I'm doing right here, calling introspect. And we see that the introspect command, it basically looks at the SQL schema inside of the SQL Server database, and it generates the Prisma models for it. And one thing you'll notice is that while we had 5 tables that we created in the database, we only have 4 models that are now being represented in the database here. And the reason for that is that the one table here, the tag to post table, is actually a relation table that's used to create a many-to-many relationship between the post and the tag tables. So, like if you want to put that into English words, it would mean that one post can have many tags, but one tag can also have many posts. So that's what a many-to-many relationship is. Typically, that's represented via relation tables in relational databases. And if you follow certain conventions for creating these relation tables that we have documented in our documentation, then what happens in your Prisma schema is that you'll actually end up with a many-to-many relationship for this relation specifically, rather than it creating a table that would just mirror basically the relation table from the actual database. So
is that optional when you introspect? Do you know? Like, can you say that you want to have a model generated from your pivot table rather than have Prisma?
That is currently not optional, I think. If you follow the rules for these relation tables, then Prisma will automatically pick it up into a many-to-many relation. And to be fair, like most of the time, that's actually what you want, because that will give you a much nicer experience when you query the API using Prisma Client in the end. There, it's much nicer when you can just go from post to tag directly in your query, rather than having this intermediate table that you have to include in your query to get from one table to the other. So it's really about convenience in the API that'll be provided to you in the end when querying the database. So I ran the introspect command, and the next thing that is shown here is that we want to make a couple of changes to the Prisma schema to rename relation fields, because relation fields after introspection at the moment are still just named after the model, but oftentimes it's nicer to at least lowercase them. Sometimes you also want to pluralize them, and actually sometimes you want to change entirely like how you name them. And in this case, for example, I want to add more kind of semantics to the field by renaming it from user to written by, and also so that it matches up with the name of the foreign key right here. The same with the user field on post. So that's where I want to use the author field. This I want to call tags because also it's plural. Posts again. And this is going to be comments and posts. So I have my Prisma schema in its final form. So let me go back and just keep following the instructions from the README right here. We have the npx Prisma generate command, which is going to update my generated Prisma client node module that I have locally already in my project, so that the API now matches all the changes that I've introduced in the Prisma schema. And now we have these two commands here, npm run test and npm run start. And to just quickly show you what this does, so the project is configured that it uses tests via jest. So I can just run a test script right here. If I do that, it looks something like this. Npm run test. And it just executes all of the different tests that are specified in the test file. And in the same way, the source file right here is basically just a very simple script with a single function that gets called at the end of the script, where we're using Prisma client for a lot of different operations. So I can also go ahead and just execute that script. I'm switching between yarn and npm like a pro here. So that's what it prints. It just is creating a whole bunch of stuff in the database, printing it out. And in the end, if I'm not mistaken, it just cleans up the database in the end, basically. I think, cool. At least if that's called. And we can also go back to Table Plus. And we now see that we have a bunch of new data in the database here.
It's a bit of a tangent, perhaps, but do we have anything that it goes into detail about recommendations for testing when using Prisma? I know that's something that I've been asked before. Is there like an example spot for that in the examples repo?
We actually do have one example in the examples repo that shows how to do integration testing indeed. I believe, it's even here on top level. So this project called Testing Express, it shows you how to do integration tests on a very high level using this library called Supertest. If you're like interested in like how this works, then you can go ahead and check out this repo here. We don't really have any concrete documentation for that yet, but that's also something that we certainly want to work on because it's just such an important part of development. And we need to be able to educate our users how to best test their applications when they're using Prisma.
Awesome.
Cool. That was part one of this release and a really exciting one. The second one is something that we already talked about in some form in one of our first live streams. Do you remember what that was, Ryan? I'm giving you.
Yes, we were talking about single command stuff for database migration, basically, like something that would go kind of in tandem with that to get stuff into your database after you've written a schema.
That's exactly it. And it's somewhat also related to Prisma Migrate in some way, because it's also a tool that lets you just take your Prisma schema, the declarative Prisma schema that you're writing by hand, all the different models, and map it to your database schema, right? So in the example that I just showed with SQL Server, what I did, I first created the database, then I ran some SQL code to create tables in the database, and then I introspected the database in order to generate my Prisma models into the Prisma schema. This new Prisma DB push command is effectively the opposite of that workflow, because what this command does, it lets me write these Prisma models inside the Prisma schema by hand, and then map the Prisma models to Prisma tables, to SQL tables in the database. So it's really the inverted workflows, so to say. And it's a really handy feature that's especially nice for prototyping and local development when you don't care so much about a migration history that you want to certainly keep track of when you're running things in production. Like there, you want to be very sure about what kind of changes have been made to the database, and you want to be able to roll back and replay these changes using dedicated migration files. That's not quite the same use case as this Prisma DB push command that we're talking about here, which really is meant for prototyping and development purposes, where you just need to be your database in a certain state so that you can try something out against it. And you don't really care about how this state in your database is being achieved. And that's exactly what this command is for. So I want to show you a quick demo of how this command is working. And the way how I do that actually is I'm going to stay in the same project, but the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change this Prisma schema right here. And I'm going to remove the SQL Server preview feature here. Then I'll change this to SQLite. And then I'm going to change the database URL inside the .env file to just a local SQLite database file. And this is also everything you need to swap databases when using Prisma. So this is literally everything I have to do. I have to change the provider field here from SQL Server to SQLite. Then I have to adjust the database URL. And now this Prisma schema is already not connected to my SQL Server instance anymore, but instead it will be connected to a SQLite database file that will be created on my file system when I run the Prisma DB push command. So that's what I'm going to do, Prisma DB push. I have to append the preview feature option right here because the feature is still running in preview. And here we go. We have a new dev.db file that we can inspect, for example, using Prisma Studio. And we see that the schema is in sync with, or that the database is in sync with the Prisma schema. And if I just wanted to change this and, for example, remove the comment model right here and all its relations, and it's just, again, really as easy as running Prisma DB push again to bring my database into that state where I can use it. So let's restart Prisma Studio and convince ourselves that the comment model has been removed and only the 3 other models are still available. So it's a really quick and easy way how you can kind of prototype your database schema without the overhead of generating migration files on your file system. And it's a really nice thing for people to get started and just hack around a little bit until they're sure about what their database schema should look like. And when they're ready to actually put everything into production, that's when Prisma Migrate is coming in and where they can actually generate these migration files that will track the migration history and can be used to version your database schema.
That's really cool. One thing that I've been wondering about with that, and I mean, it's brand new, so maybe there's not a strong recommendation yet, but what happens when you're developing and prototyping and you use DB push, and then you move over to migrate to get into production, and then you go back to development to develop further? Do you still use DB push and then do migrations once you're all settled? Or once you've done your first migration, should you be on migrate from that point on? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so my understanding and the way how we want to build migrate is that indeed, when you are on in your local development environment, you should be using Prisma DB push as long as, or you're not happy with your database schema. And once you settled on what the database schema looks like, then you can generate the migration files using Prisma Migrate. But you are saving all these intermediate steps, all these intermediate small migrations that you typically have to do when you just think about, maybe I need another Boolean here, or like this should actually be like a varchar instead of a long text field, or like something like this. These kind of small changes to the database that you can now apply very quickly, rather than having to worry about creating migration files for all of them. So I really think that when you're in local development, it's Prisma DB push. But at some point, when you're happy with that state, then you're ready to generate migration files using Prisma Migrate.
I just thought about an idea for a VS Code extension, which is something that will run DB push on save when you save your Prisma schema. So you don't have to be doing up arrow and hitting enter all the time. The little thing.
Like, funny side note about this is that we actually used to have functionality like this up until half a year ago or so. It was a command in the Prisma CLI that was called Prisma Def. That would start a local development server, and that would watch your Prisma schema and indeed apply migrations and also regenerate Prisma client for you, so that as long as you were in that kind of mental state of really just prototyping, trying things out, you really just needed to save the file and everything would update. And maybe we are going to rebuild something like this again. I don't think it's impossible like that we are rebuilding something like this. The reason why we dropped it back then was that it came with a lot of complexity and didn't work super smoothly. And we just thought, okay, we want to focus on stabilizing everything rather than like building these more exotic features. But it is very useful. And I could see us certainly bringing back a feature like this.
Cool. Well, I have to give it more of a run, give it a spin myself, DB push, but it looks like it's awesome. Thanks for the demo. I guess we should talk about events now. If you're up to move into that section, we'll talk about some of the recent things that have been going on. And one of them, maybe a lot of folks here were in on this, which was Next.js Conf, which just took place earlier this week. And so I thought it was a great virtual conference, probably one of the best virtual conferences that I have attended, during this pandemic year. I think it was like, there was a lot of attention to detail from Vercel, like on all aspects. They put a lot of effort into the production quality, both of like the keynote and the talks throughout the event as well, but also on the website for the conference. I thought that was really well done, and some exciting new features that have come along and have landed. I guess Next.js version 10. We can talk about that, right? Next.js version 10 is here. We've got this new image element, which helps to take care of all of the nuances around rendering images and making sure your image file size is not gigantic and stuff like that. And that's kind of just, you swap out image tags for this image component basically in your Next.js application. So lots of cool stuff like that. And yeah, great keynote. I enjoyed several of the talks. Shout out to my buddy Ado Kukic. He gave a talk. He works at MongoDB and he gave a great talk about working with MongoDB in Next.js. So lots of great content there. Were there any talks that you particularly enjoyed there?
Yeah, so like I really like the keynote as well, and it really gave me some strong WWDC vibes. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever attended like one of these yearly developer conferences from Apple, but the kind of intro video, the entire style, it really reminded me a lot of the style that Apple is doing or like has. So that was like certainly interesting to see, and I absolutely agree with you that in terms of the online experience of attending an event, I think this was definitely next level. I mean, like, it was crazy that like, even though everything happened entirely remote, you really felt like you were in something with a community, right? And I think they just did that through the experience on the website with the different stages that you could super easily switch from one to the next. And also with the Discord server, where a lot of activity actually was going on, and people were talking, and a lot of different companies also presenting themselves. We also had a booth actually at the conference. Maybe we can quickly drop the link of that also in the comments so that people can still check it out.
Do you want to grab that link?
Here I have it, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, I thought the Discord aspect of this conference was especially notable because, yeah, it was interesting. Like, I use Discord very irregularly, and I've got, like, there's a chat group that I'm in with a bunch of my conference pals with there on Discord that we're talking every now and then. And what I felt like on conference day was almost like the same feeling that I get when I show up at an in-person conference and I start to see all the people I know filter in, but virtually this time, of course, through Discord. I thought that aspect of it was really, really key to making it a good conference, because that social aspect was there in some fashion. You know, obviously not to the same degree that you would have at an in-person event, but still great. I mean, it was fun. It was fun socializing. It was fun seeing the talks. Overall really good. And like you said, we had the expo booth, and that link is there in the chat now.
Yeah. Exactly. And that booth also features a video that you did, an introductory video for Prisma with Next.js. Like, what are you showing and explaining in that video, Ryan?
Yeah, so in that video, and I'm actually going to grab the link to it as we're chatting here. I'll get the share link. Yeah, this video shows, so I mean, it was prepared for the expo too, because there's a video that goes along with your spot in the expo, and it basically shows how you would use Prisma with Next.js. So with Next, it's interesting, of course, because we've got the stuff that makes Next a client framework, but also a server framework at the same time. And so that's really cool when it comes to doing things on the back end that feed into the front end, like Prisma. So you can use Prisma in various places that you might not otherwise be able to. Things like when you're doing your get server-side props, get static props, if you're doing static site generation. So this video shows how to use Prisma in the various parts of a Next application that might not be so obvious. So like get static props, that's one place. Get server-side props is another, and then in API routes as well. So yeah, check it out. There's the link there, and yeah, there's also if you want to get going with Next and Prisma, I'm going to get a link here to our Next.js page. If you want to get going with Next and Prisma even further, there is this page which talks more about it. And yeah, we've got docs, we've got examples. Prisma and Next go together quite well, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay, so we did Next.js Conf, and we got the booth shown there. That's great. We had there's a couple other events that were going on too. So the Prisma Meetup happened yesterday. This was the very first Prisma Meetup that we've ever had. We've been involved for quite a long time in various meetups, things like GraphQL Berlin and TypeScript Berlin. Is it TypeScript Berlin? Is that the name of that one?
Yes. Exactly.
And other stuff in the past, like GraphQL Conf back in the day last year, I guess. And so we've done a lot of events, but this is the first Prisma centric one. And we have a link coming at you right here. I'll copy this into the chat. So this is.
I think I was faster already. I already dropped the YouTube.
Oh, you got it. Thank you. It's there. Yeah. So Daniel was emceeing, and we had some great talks. We had Hervé from Prisma doing a talk. We had a talk about database horror stories, which was an interesting one. So check it out. There's the recording of the event there, and this was number one. There are more to come. Yeah. Prisma centered kind of meetup. And if anyone out there is doing anything interesting with Prisma and you're interested in doing a talk at a Prisma Meetup, get in touch with us, because we would be happy to hear what you want to do for a talk and put you up there. Yeah. So that was the Prisma Meetup. Anything you wanted to say about that?
So I think it was a huge success, and it also, it wasn't the same kind of level, of course, that we had at Next.js Conf. It was a regular meetup that we streamed on YouTube, so it didn't have that interactive vibe, but still it felt very nice, and I think a lot of people were tuning in live, and we had really great talks. I really liked the talk from Hervé, who was talking about our roadmap, the way how we're thinking about it, the way how we're planning new features. So I think for kind of everybody who thinks about using Prisma, maybe they're not so sure about how we are working, how we are planning new features, and if they can kind of bet on us implementing things that we have on the roadmap, I think this talk gives a lot of insight. And it also changes that we really have matured as a company with proper processes, with a great design team, with a great product team that's led by Hervé, with really good interfaces to the engineering team that's operating entirely on GitHub. So every GitHub issue that is getting is being created in the Prisma repo is being watched by our engineering team and prioritized in our planning meetings. So I can just reiterate that whenever you have ideas about what you think Prisma should look like, how it should behave, if you have any questions, then GitHub is definitely the best place to raise these kinds of points, because we have all our engineering processes run through GitHub, and that's the best place to make your voice heard.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Niko. We should talk about some other stuff with regards to some new content that's out. I'm going to grab a link here and paste it in. This is a brand new tutorial that was just published. So here's the link. It's a tutorial on DigitalOcean, and it is written by our very own Daniel, and it's a very in-depth, very thorough tutorial on building a GraphQL API with Prisma and deploying it. You may have heard of this new thing that has come out recently, deploying it to DigitalOcean on their app platform. So yeah, Daniel's got a great style. I find his tutorials to be super in-depth, very informative, very detailed. So this will do you well if you're looking to do GraphQL on DigitalOcean with Prisma. And Niko's going to pull it up here, I believe. This tutorial goes into a lot of detail, and it touches on this app platform thing from DigitalOcean, which I've tried out. I've given this a spin. I ran into an issue myself. Daniel and I talked about this the last time we did a stream, because I couldn't figure out how to specify the node version for my deployment, and there was a bug with Prisma at the time. It was giving an error when trying to run with a specific node version. That has since been resolved, so you should be just fine pushing to the app platform. And yeah, check it out here. You'll likely really like the app platform. I sure did. It was really clean UI, really easy to reason about what you're looking at on the dashboard. So quite good. And yeah.
So what does the app platform kind of compare to in terms of maybe existing services? Where does it fit into the existing tools and services that people use for deployment?
Yeah, I mean, so I suppose you would say it's a competitor to Heroku most closely, is what I would think. Yeah. Certainly, I suppose it is not as mature because it is brand new, and that means that you're going to not have a lot of features that you might get from Heroku. But it is the kind of thing you want to use if you don't like configuring instances and load balancers and networking and all of this stuff like you have to do on AWS. Yeah, I mean, AWS gives you tools to make that easier and have that managed for you. But even if you use something like Elastic Beanstalk in AWS, it's still a headache, I think, to go through all the paces that you have to there to make things happen. And so, like Heroku, the app platform really smooths that out. It's like you pick your GitHub repo, you pick your branch to deploy from. And so, in the same way that Netlify gives you static sites based on push to GitHub or to wherever deployed for you, it's in the same vein, but for applications, for long running server processes. And yeah, that's the idea behind App Platform.
Yes. Cool.
Yeah. So check that article out. Let Daniel know what you think, and he'll be happy to hear from you. We should talk about this next one, end-to-end type safety. Niko, you wanted to talk about this piece of code.
Yeah. So one tweet I came across from Gary Bernhardt, who I've seen on Twitter a couple of times already, and he posted a video to a YouTube, or like a link to a YouTube video that he created, where he's showing the process of end-to-end type safety, and really shows the power that end-to-end type safety, that idea of end-to-end type safety has for your code, and the confidence that it gives you. So I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about that idea of end-to-end type safety, because I think that's a term that gets thrown around quite a bit, but like maybe some people don't really know what to associate with it. So like I quickly wanted to talk about this. Like maybe Ryan, like what do you think, or what's your understanding when like somebody talks about end-to-end type safety? What pops up in your mind?
Yeah, so for me, it makes me think that at every point that you interact with your code across the whole stack, your front-end code, your back-end code, maybe even the way that like a request would hit your API, and certainly database access, given Prisma, all of these things are guaranteed to be safe in the way that you access them. You can't put a number where a string is supposed to go, and extending that, instead of just like on one aspect of your stack, extending that across, you're threading it through the whole stack, right? So that you have the same types informing your development process across all those parts. That's what comes to mind for me, but perhaps you have a tweak on that definition.
So that was already spot on. I think the main point is indeed that your entire application stack, from the front end to the database, is typed in a coherent way, so that all the typings, they kind of flow through the entire stack and into each other. Like maybe they're transformed here and there because you have a password field of a user in the database that you're not exposing in the API. So of course you have to go and transform the field or the structures, the types at different layers of your stack, but that it all kind of still fits together. And the core benefit that end-to-end type safety brings you is a lot of confidence when you need to refactor code. Because like what often happens is that, of course, when you're introducing a new table or a new column in the database, that you now have to go in your entire application, so in your backend server as well as in your front end, and now include that new value that you introduced in the database somehow. So you have to make changes to different parts of your code. The same if you remove a column, or if you need a new property that you want to display on the front end, you always have to change different parts of your stack. And the big benefit that you get with end-to-end type safety is that no matter where you have to make that change, is that TypeScript, the TypeScript compiler, is going to show you all the different places where you have to make that change, because otherwise it won't let you run the application at all. So that really is the big difference when you're using TypeScript or plain JavaScript. With plain JavaScript, you really kind of have to trust your own knowledge of the code base, which gets more and more difficult as your team is growing, of course, and your and your entire development organization is growing and maybe splitting into different teams. Then it becomes impossible for everybody to know which pieces of the code need to be changed when changes are introduced. And the big benefit with TypeScript is that, of course, then the TypeScript compiler shows you in your code which parts need to be adjusted. And you can just follow all the different error messages that it spits out. And that's precisely what's being shown really nicely in that video that I shared here in the comments, where in the video it's shown how a column in the database is being changed. And then thanks to the end-to-end type safe setup in the video, the TypeScript compiler just shows you all the different parts where it had to be adjusted. What I find notable about this was, though, that the video itself, it wasn't using Prisma. So like what was shown there was built with Next.js, and then a couple of additional kind of libraries that enable this end-to-end type safety. So a tool called schema.ts that's effectively also performing some sort of database introspection and generating TypeScript types for it. And it all was set up into a sort of pipeline to achieve this end-to-end type safety. And that also shows that end-to-end type safety is a very generic idea. You can achieve end-to-end type safety with different kinds of technologies. For example, you could use a stack where you have a relational database. There you have a schema, then you're using TypeScript, then you're using maybe OpenAPI or Swagger to also put a schema onto your API. Then you generate typings from that API definition, and these typings you can then use on the front end. That is a setup for an end-to-end type-safe application. But of course, you could do the API layer using GraphQL, which inherently is strongly typed, and that gives you the same benefits that you get with Swagger or OpenAPI in that case if you're using a REST API. So it really depends on your own preferences, and this end-to-end type-safe setup is achievable with a variety of different tools. But it typically also requires a lot of boilerplate and a lot of sort of like manual fiddling and manual scripting. So with Prisma, of course, this becomes a lot easier because we already have that type generation baked in, and we are already the connection between your application code and your database, so that you really have a very smooth integration between these two layers. Now adding a GraphQL API on top of that, maybe with Nexus, it all integrates super smoothly, and all the types are just flowing through your application and giving you safety and confidence as you're developing the application. So I think it would be really interesting to see what a corresponding version of that video would look like with Prisma. And I'm sure that this almost 20-minute video that was posted there like probably could be squeezed down to 5 or 10 minutes if they had been using a stack that made this idea of end-to-end type safety a lot easier, because it's just inherently already solving that problem.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and one tool that I really like to orchestrate the things that need to be orchestrated so that you can share types across your whole stack is, are you familiar with NX? It's a tool for using for making mono repos, essentially.
I don't think I've used it.
Yeah, so NX, it's made by the folks at Narwhal, which is a consulting. They do a lot of Angular work. I'm actually doing a talk. I'm going to paste this link in. I'm doing a talk at NG.conf. It's called Enterprise NG. It's a special edition of NG.conf happening in November. The link is there. This is my talk. It's TypeScript for every part of your stack. And what I show is using NX to give yourself a mono repo, and then having a front-end application in Angular, but it could be React, so it could be whatever, in TypeScript, and then having a backend with Nest.js is what I show, and then having database access with Prisma, and then taking the type that you get after generating your Prisma model and applying that to all these various parts of the stack. So you have your database access type safe, but then you also use that same type in your front end. So when you're templating out your view and you want to know what you have available to go into your view, it's really simple. You just put the dot after, post or whatever, and you've got your fields there. Extending that to the back end as well, so that you're type safe on the back end. So this talk will show you, along the lines of how to do that in an NX setting. But yeah, I love the idea of end-to-end type safety. it boosts confidence quite a bit, I would say.
Yeah, that's very nice. So everybody go check out that awesome video from Gary here. All right, I think we're slowly coming to the end, Ryan.
Yep.
One final question for you. When is Prisma Migrate ready?
Oh, good question. I think it's no, it's not today. Yeah, I don't know. What is the latest announcement of Prisma Migrate and its readiness?
All right. Well, I mean, I can't say, or like, we don't know when it's going to be ready, right? I kind of like, it was a trick question. There was no chance for you to get it right. Like, if we're lucky, like, maybe we'll have it for Christmas this year. But I really don't know. If you're curious, you can check out the roadmap. But if anybody who is watching is really keen on kind of being part of the development of Prisma Migrate, being always up to date about what the latest state is, about what the latest versions are, and if you maybe already have a use case for it, I want to drop a link to a type form in the comments right now that you can check. This is a link to a Prisma Migrate survey, which you can fill out, and you can leave your email address to get early access to Prisma Migrate. So we're getting really close to the first somewhat stable release that is not going to be labeled experimental anymore. And if you're excited about Prisma Migrate, if you have a use case for it, or if you just want to really see be part of the development of Prisma Migrate by sharing your feedback and using it in the wild, then please go and fill out this type form and leave your contact details so that our product team can get in touch with you and give you access to the early access program of Prisma Migrate.
Awesome. Yes, I am looking forward to it. I think it'll be great when it's here. It'll round everything out in a very nice way for stabilization for Prisma, and yeah, I'm excited.
100%. I think like Prisma Migrate is really the last missing piece to make Prisma the full-on like database toolkit that you can use in your Node.js and TypeScript applications, and don't need to worry about any of these topics like database access or migrations anymore.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Cool.
I think we are at the end, Ryan.
I think that's it. Well, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you everyone who has tuned in. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with our next update with Prisma 2.11 scheduled in 2 weeks. So we will see everyone then. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.